Some. Who knows the approach of Prozesskostenrechnung in German? There are some. And these are very comparable concepts. In about 1985 or 1987, in US as well as in Germany, these approaches came up. In the US, the reason was particularly that indirect costs until that time were allocated on a quite rough basis. So there was sometimes even just one common allocation base for all indirect costs company-wide. I'll show you that based on an example later on. And of course, this is not a very accurate allocation of indirect cost. And when it comes to indirect cost, you see absorption costing, by the way, is activity-based costing is an absorption costing based concept. So it's not variable costing, it's allocating fixed cost as well as variable cost, all the indirect costs to certain products. But based on the initial situation, activity-based costing at the first place, of course, improves allocation of indirect costs. And we'll go to the approach in detail. Here you see the learning objectives, and we'll start with a very simple but somehow related example. If you do allocate costs just based on one standard rate, it's like sharing a meal when you have different orders. So you see these three girls, they go to restaurants and they consume different meals with different prices, but they share. And of course you see the girls with the cheap order, they pay the same price as the girls with the rather expensive orders. And this is the same idea. What happens if you allocate cost, if you allocate indirect cost based on one standard rate like machine hours or labor hours or so to certain products. And we'll come to the more practical example right now. The example is a lens manufacturer. They manufacture optical lenses and normal lenses and more complex lenses. The reason why we have chosen this example, I will explain after this lecture. So we have a normal product and a complex product. And we'll start to calculate unit cost based on a single indirect cost rate. So we have, by the way, we produce 80,000 of these normal lenses, but only 20,000 complex lenses. This is what you should keep in mind. And then we first determine direct cost. Normal lenses, this is a given, by the way, 1.5 million and some labor cost. So overall, normal lenses generate direct cost of 2.3 million roughly. And as you know, 80,000 are produced, so you have direct cost of 29 for the normal lenses. Complex lenses are a little bit more expensive. You have direct cost of 1.18 million. You only produce 20,000 and direct costs are 59. easy calculation so far. And now it comes to indirect cost. And again, activity-based costing is very much about indirect cost. Indirect costs are not directly related to those products. So it's about how to allocate 2.9 million. And traditionally, we only have one indirect cost rate to allocate that. And the allocation rate is based on direct labor hours. Direct labor hours are 50,000, and this is how you determine an indirect cost rate company-wide. So this means we have an indirect cost rate of 58 euro per direct labor hour. And once you know this information, we only need to know how many hours we need for these different products. And the information is we have 36,000 for the normal lenses, and we have 14,000 for the complex lenses. So overall 50,000, of which 36,000 refer to normal lenses, 14,000 refer to complex lenses. Based on this information, you can calculate total product cost based on the schedule. You see direct cost per unit are 29, respectively 59. Direct labor hours is the allocation base for the indirect cost of 2.9 million. And this is how you allocate that indirect cost to normal lenses and complex lenses. Now you add indirect cost and direct cost for the products, and the result is that we have 55 for the normal lenses and we have 99 for the complex lenses. If we now consider the selling price of 60 for the normal lenses and for 142 for the complex lenses, we can calculate the margin. What you see, complex lenses have a rather high margin, roughly 30%. Normal lenses, a rather low margin of 8%. We don't know whether this is good or bad by the moment because we did not do a detailed analysis of the indirect cost so far. But this is the starting situation when in the US, two professors invented activity-based costing. They had a bad feeling of these results because, again, indirect costs are allocated very roughly. And now activity-based costing comes into place. The idea is that indirect costs are caused by activities. And so the exercise of activity-based costing is that you determine activities and later on cost pools for these activities, which are then allocated to the products. But first of all, as indirect costs are allocated based on estimations, still activity-based costing is kind of an estimation because in practice it's quite difficult to determine cost for these activities and to allocate cost from the activity pools to the products. So the first priority is to determine as much direct cost as possible. So sometimes when you analyze cost in more sophisticatedly, then you will find out that you might have more direct cost than it seems at the beginning. So as much as possible, direct cost, and then the remaining indirect cost should be allocated in the first step based on activities. So you ask, oh, what activities do cause my total indirect cost, and then you allocate the total indirect cost to these activities, and this is called cost pools. So you have one cost pool for each activity. And once you have determined the cost pool, you need to know how many activities, how many units of these activities are used for a certain product. So this is the cost allocation basis. Again, this is the process in a very rough basis. You have fundamental cost categories out of your accounting systems, but you then allocate these cost categories to the activities. So you build the cost pools and you determine allocation rates for each cost pool.